Well, I had come to you, originally with this after literally I hadn't taken the class yet. I had just been looking for who on our campus, knows about circular systems, who are the experts that, I could talk to about, the specific project of wanting to make fashion in our community or to learn about how there's some circular things in our community that could potentially be done elsewhere. And you were actually the one who helped me zoom in on Ivy Trading Post as an interesting example of something that's, not actually commonly done everywhere. And we had talked about why it is different than maybe a traditional thrift model. So what I was hoping to kind of revisit in this interview, to potentially share with people is to give a little bit more of that background, on why on your version, whatever that may be, of why Ivy Trading Post is special, and then even just starting before that with one question about if you could describe, like in your words, as someone who works in this and teaches about this, what are the characteristics of a truly circular system? Like, what is a circular system for people who might not know at all what that is?
That's a lot to cover. I'll start with what's a circular system and why it is, um, why people are talking about it, why it is actually not a new thing, um, but in the context of our current society, it seems foreign and kind of elitist, maybe even, and a new thing. A circular system is simply a way to think about how materials and I'll say stuff, the products that we use in everyday life and every other part of life, being whether it's commercial or what we have in our homes or stuff we never ever see, but underlie how we get get products from one place to another and exist with technology, etc. And that is when we in our society these days, when we use things, uh, the materials come out of the earth, out of get get processed, turned into components that go into products, the products manufactured, they are delivered through a logistics system to the point of uh, retail or business use, whatever it is, and we use stuff. For the most part, we have no idea how it's made, where it comes from, what it's made of. To us, something that is plastic is just plastic. It's not a particular kind of plastic. It's not very few, I don't want to say very few, but not a whole lot of people are look at a piece of plastic with a plastic bottle and say, oh, that that came from crude oil that was recovered offshore from the ocean or um, somewhere in the middle of Texas, etc. And when we're done with product, we generally toss it in the trash. That isn't the way life was. We can afford to do that because our whole economic system uh, is based on making stuff, using it, and then when it is no longer useful, even to us as individuals or to a business or to whoever, we get rid of it and we don't generally care what happens to it. Um, and we tend to get rid of it by disposing of it. But not all things actually are disposed of, even absent any kind of regulatory uh, regime. Some things in the even in our current economy have always had residual value when the first users, or sometimes the later users, um, don't want it anymore. And those tend to be things um, like either vehicles. There's been pretty much forever a very strong secondary market for used cars and trucks and major vehicles. Um, things are um, clothing has to some degree a secondary market in the current economy. It's primarily through thrift stores, but not exclusively. There's long been vintage stores for, call it, better quality goods. Um, Go back a little bit in time, maybe 100 years. Routinely, uh, in urban areas, there were people that would go around and collect rags and collect rags because primarily they're made of cotton, and those rags could be used, and the rags were generally clothing, could be used to make a variety of other things, or in some cases, turned back into fiber and fabric to use in clothing, albeit generally cheaper clothing. And all along, metals, because they are relatively hard to get out of the earth and process and turn them into something useful, metals have had value when the user of the product made of metal no longer wants it, and or because businesses that create the products have scrap metal in the production process. Almost always that has been recovered, resmelted, and turned back into products in an almost never-ending cycle. It's absolutely true that people throw metal stuff away all the time, but that's really a relatively recent phenomenon. Um, so the circular economy is saying our current economy, which tends to be we get stuff out, we make something from it, we use it. When we no longer want it, we throw it away. Well, there is no real away. It goes into a landfill, or in some places, it goes into an incinerator. And we have all the residual impacts that are associated with that, with doing those things. And we got to keep digging stuff out of the earth, recovering stuff out of the oceans, you know, and causing all kinds of pollution, blah, 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 blah. Um, People have said, hey, we've had a good model if we go back far enough. Why don't we think about doing that kind of activity again? but do it in a way where we're building it into the fact that we use technology in a different way such that we design products such that they get a longer life and can be either uh, rejuvenated at the end of the first life when somebody doesn't want them. We refurbish it, we remanufacture it, we can do something like that. Or if it's a biologically based product, we can compost it and we set up the structures that limit what has to get thrown, what truly has to get thrown away and deposited in what we call landfill, from the things that actually can be returned to a useful use, whether as a product or as just the material itself. So it limits the extent to which we've got to basically mine the earth, because mining the earth is not something we can do forever. And we really would like to save ourselves and save all our critters, uh, and have a world that has a chance for a much more extensive and fruitful life where, as they say, everybody gets along.
Yeah,
So that answers the first part. What's interesting about IB Trading Post, Sean Wilkie actually took the industrial ecology class and said, "Have you ever heard of the IB Trading Post?" I went, "No." And she proceeded to educate me on what it was. I ride my bike through IB fairly regularly. So I had seen it. I didn't know I was looking at it, but I had seen it. And I went, wow, this is an absolutely incredible idea. And it's not just an idea. It's it's something that works, and it works as a special case. It probably is applicable elsewhere if the circumstances are appropriate. But it but what's so impressed me was uh, that Sean and the other people who put it together had a vision of what it could be, not only in terms of just the part about trading, and it's basically an exchange, a barter, and bartering's been around forever. Uh, a kind of bartering, I'll say. But it came with all this other stuff about educating people about what the world of apparel really is about. Because again, like lots of things we have in our life, very few people know how anything is made. Uh, you might know how a piece of clothing is made because you've sewn a piece of clothing and you've learned to sew, but that's not how it's made in at scale in a commercial setting. And the notion of combining this, I'll call it a barter system, where money isn't the method of exchange, but the method of exchange is stuff, time, participation, and education. And that was, I'll say, the genius move about it, and that it's education in a context where it doesn't feel like you're getting it rammed down your throat. Um, and and just really impressive. It is a small, call it micro scale, uh, circular system that all too in the world, all too often there are these great grand ideas, well worth trying, and they last, yeah, a couple of years at best. Most small businesses don't even last 5 years. There's some evidence that that majority fail within 2 or 3 years. This thing's been going now. It's not quite 10 years, but
No, yeah, it's this is the 10-year anniversary. It's fully 10 years
okay.
now.
Um,
Yeah.
it is there's something real there for it to last that long. It is um it is an economic activity, even though there isn't a money exchange, and it succeeds because it meets the needs of people who are the exchangers, and um, the it rests on a basis of volunteers, and consequently that limits it to a certain set of circumstances, the exact model, but there's potentially a part of the economy that could function much like the IV trading post. And, the question is there a business model where uh, the, the that makes up for the lack of cash exchange with the actual clothing, um, but still allows it to function as something other than just on a voluntary basis.
Yeah. No, I completely when you said I don't remember exactly what it was, but one of the things you said just made me think of my experience as well of having also actually I mean, in my first couple of years, I biked by it. I'd even taken stuff during a 3 for Free event before. And I knew what they were about in the sense that I had heard and, I talked to them. And obviously, I have a background in environmental studies. So I was familiar with like the concept of the fast fashion industry being bad or just the fashion industry generally. Um, but yeah, I have just been amazed because one of the things I have been asking people about in interviews is sort of expecting is saying basically like, well, do you think that you educate people through this? And every single one of them have, I mean, just dozens of stories of times when people have come through there and they had, really meaningful conversations about like people's clothing consumption, personal stories about truly changing their own habits by nature of interacting with this. So that's been really cool to see. And actually, you answered I mean, pretty much all of my questions in the best way. Like, I only wrote a few, and I think most of them have been answered. There's only, I guess, one other thing that I would want to get your insight on. As you may remember, what this project is going to be is we're working on building out um, a web guide that will also have a web series associated so that if people can't make the workshops that I'm going to be hosting next quarter, then there will be some sort of like interesting videos that they can watch along with the intention to give people sort of inspiration and concrete materials and advice on how to start a successful, or hopefully start something that could be as successful as IB Trading Post, primarily on college campuses, but maybe somewhere else too. And so I think you had kind of started to hint at it at the end there, but I think the last piece of this, as you mentioned, is just um, like that they've really found a way to make it work not just as a circular model, but as a community model. And I know you're also a business professional, so maybe if you had any further insight or anything that you might tell someone who's saying to themselves, "Wow, this is a great thing for the planet and for my community, and I'd like to start this." Um, you know, what about, and I'm going to ask this very generally, but you may take it any way that you want, of just sort of what about them as an organization do you think would be worth replicating on other campus, or yeah, like, do you know what I mean, of like as a business model, or what could we take away that would to give advice to people who might want to do something similar?
Yeah. So, um, pretty much every campus, there are, s- I'll say, there's a range of students. There's a range of students based on socioeconomic attributes, culturally, you name it, you can find pretty much anybody on most campuses. What it what this doesn't take a dose of altruism uh, to function. That's not what this is about. It 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 is the insight here is a recognition that there are people who actually need clothes and don't have a whole lot of money to spend on them. And need is a not necessarily a really precise word in this case, but there is a need for at least some part of uh, the college and beyond. So there are circumstances I could see outside of a college environment for this, but there are there are people who absolutely need to use the food bank and just don't have um, resources. They're barely hanging on um, to stay in school. Uh, and this fulfills a need because, okay, it'd be nice if I could get something a little different instead of wearing the same thing, every other day kind of thing. And so just on that basis alone, this would function. But it goes beyond that because there are people who use IB trading basically as a place to shop because you open up your closet, pull open a drawer, and like you're sick of looking at the same colors and the same stuff. And um, we that's the goes into the cultural part. We are culturally um, hooked on fashion. And fashion, by definition, means something new is coming down the pike. And I I want to be part of that. I may be 6 months behind, but I want to be part of that. Um, so much of clothing today actually doesn't wear out. There's a lot of cheap junk that wears out pretty quick, but really a whole lot of it has a much longer lifetime physically than it does in terms of the current culture. Things change. People, what one might wear today, you might not really be wanting to wear 2 years from now, or even 6 months from now for whatever sets of reasons. And this fulfills that need as well. And the part about that is people for whom it's not necessarily an economic driver to um, shop at the Ivy Trading Post, but it's more of a fashion driver. And they're contributors and receivers as well. And again, the insight of Sean and our colleagues that that's the case makes is part of why it works. And thinking about that, um, it's going to be true on pretty much every college campus. The fashions and styles might differ. What you in Santa Barbara uh, would be interested in is not necessarily what folks in, I'll say, Minneapolis, Minnesota, or Boston, or Atlanta. Definitely not, probably not Louisiana. It's just, peop there's different vibe everywhere. So it all it's that local it's the local scale. I don't want to necessarily be great if it was bigger scale. Um, and the question is, um, resources are needed, and how you get those resources, the without having the economic driver of selling the stuff that's exchanged. Um, that is the challenge. And the reason why colleges might work better in that is that the ways in which IB Trading Post established and the existence of associated students and whatever else on campus um, potentially provides the financial resources that you need in the background to make it all work. And those, I'll say, generally mostly are there across most campuses, not always, though.